Hey guys, and welcome to the free Game Dev Rocket mini course. What are we going to be making Noah in this tutorial series? Super excited to have you here. This is a really exciting time. We're going to be actually creating a small video game within 3 videos. So in this very first video, we're going to be doing something called prototyping. This is basically when we actually build the foundations of our game. We're getting into place the different mechanics. We're setting up, the basic interactions that this game will have without using any artwork or special effects. We're just creating the structure of the game using really ugly prototype 3D objects. So just cubes, spheres, all that good stuff. If you were making a 2D game, you would just use really simple, sprites, squares, ugly stick men. So we're not spending any time on the visuals. This way, we're saving time, right? We're testing the game, seeing if it's actually going to be interesting and cool, and then when we say, yes, this is great, then we actually add those effects and visuals. Alright guys, so we're here inside of the Unity Hub. I want to create a brand new Unity project by clicking on the New Project button. Let's choose the 3D Core presets, since we're going to be making a 3D game, and then we can just choose the Unity version. So let's choose the latest version of Unity, so that's 2023.1 in our case, but really anything above 2021 is going to work completely fine. Let's give our project a name, so I'm going to call this Tutorial Game Dev Rocket. There we go. Find a location on your device to save this project, and once you're done, click on Create Project. Perfect, so we are inside of Unity. This is the space where we're going to be spending a lot of time in, right? We'll be building our worlds, building our games directly inside of this interface here. So it's really exciting stuff. Yeah, so in our game, basically, we're going to have a planet. We're going to be placing objects on that planet. Those objects are going to give us a certain resource, and we're going to gain more and more resources. We're going to be able to unlock more powerful sort of objects. We're not sure of the theme yet, guys. I will see that in the next video. That's the gist of it, right? Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's a simple resource management video game, and again, we really recommend that you work on these ultra simple game projects when you're just starting out, and even later on in your development career, you're going to want to spend some time making smaller projects, having fun, experimenting. Don't think of a crazy, massive idea when you've just started out. Think of super small games that you can build and finish, and that's what we're doing in this mini course. So with that said, let's create our very first 3D game object inside of our Unity project here. So how do we do that now? So we can do that in several ways. One of the simplest way is just going to this little plus icon right here, clicking on that and going to 3D objects, and then you'll see a little list of objects that you can create right out of the box. For example, let's create a sphere here. Bam, we've created a sphere. You can see it's really small directly inside of our Unity scene. So yeah, the scene view, guys, is basically your interactive view into the game, into the world you're creating. So this is the place where you're going to be able to zoom in and out, pan, and see basically your game and interact with the objects in your game. Yeah, you can place objects, design levels. You're really going to be spending a lot of time inside of the scene. And then there's another window right next to it. It's called Game. This is what your actual game's going to look like. So for example, if I go back to my scene here and then press this little play button, this is basically me playing the game. And you're going to see the Unity is going to automatically switch to the game window. And there we go. We're actually inside of our game. Now, of course, nothing happens at the moment. We've got zero interactivity. We can't move. We can't do anything at all. All we've got is basically this sphere that we can see floating in midair. All right, so one of the first things you need to learn to do, guys, is to navigate inside of the scene view. So how do you rotate, for example? Yeah, so as you can see, first of all, I've managed to zoom in and rotate around my sphere. So to rotate, you're going to want to hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and then left click with your mouse and drag the mouse around to rotate around your Unity scene. Now, often you'll find yourself, for example, here and you're rotating, you can't find your sphere, it's all the way over here. Really simple little trick, guys, is to left click on your object. So hold the mouse over the object and left click to select it, and then press F on your keyboard to frame on it. Really Therefore, useful. Now when you're rotating around that object, it's just easier to basically see it, right? And if you're really lost it, imagine you don't even see the sphere, what can you do? Well, if you don't even see the sphere, you can't find it, but you know you've got some spherical object, right? You're looking for your player character, but you've got this huge world, and you want to find that player. Instead of like searching around frantically looking for it, you can go to something called the hierarchy. So this is the window to the left of the scene view, and it's basically listing all of the objects that make up your scene. So currently you see we've got 3 objects. We've got the main camera, We've got a little camera preview here. We've got a directional light, and we've got the sphere.
Yes, so the main camera is basically what's rendering our game. This is why we're seeing what we're seeing inside of the game view. Directional light, that's all 3D games need to have one directional light, and the sphere is the one we just created right now.
Absolutely. So now you can just select the sphere by left clicking on it and then pressing F on your keyboard again to frame on it. So you don't necessarily need to select it directly within the scene. You can also select objects within the hierarchy. Fantastic. So to zoom in and out of your scene, it's really simple. It's like most 3D softwares. You just use the mouse scroll wheel. And then really important to pan around like this, you just click on the middle mouse button and drag your mouse around.
Exactly. So this might be a little hard for you to remember, but it really becomes intuitive really quickly, right?
Of course,
of course. Just go to practice, remember the few hotkeys there are, and you're gonna be good to go. All right, the next step, guys, is that you need to learn how to transform objects in your game.
Yeah, how to manipulate them, right? How to move them, rotate them, and scale them.
Exactly.
So again, you're gonna select the sphere and then volume.
And then we're to come up here to this second little icon, which is the move tool. You'll see that there's this gizmo that appears with these 3 different arrows. And for example, if you select the green arrow, click on it, and you can now move the sphere up and down. Up and down, there we go. If you select the right arrow, you can move it left and right. And if you move the blue arrow, you can move it back and forth. And of course, you could select any square in the middle, or just, and there we go, you can move it in any direction.
Yeah.
So that's the move tool for you guys. And the hotkey for it, if you want to be quick, is W.
And very quickly, you will only be using hotkeys. I almost never actually just select the icon here, because, okay, it's just 1 second, but you know, doing that over and over again does accumulate and it kind of breaks the flow. So W for shortcut. Next, we've got the rotation tool, so it's this one right below the move tool, and the shortcut for that is E on your keyboard. And yeah, it's really simple stuff, right? You select one of these circles, for example, the blue circle, hold down left click, drag, and you're rotating your sphere. Of course, with a sphere, it's kind of hard to see the rotation in action, so this is a good opportunity to create another 3D object in our world. Maybe pause the video now, try and figure out how to create a 3D object. We showed you guys how to do that a few moments ago. Solution, either you go up here and just create 3D object, and let's say we can create a cube. Another solution to do that is just by right clicking inside of your hierarchy and going to 3D objects, cube. It's another little way of doing it. There we go, we've got our cube. I'm going to frame on it with F on my keyboard, and move it back a little bit so we've got some space between the 2 objects. And now if I rotate, you'll see how the rotation works. You can click on the red arrow, it's going to rotate in that direction. You can click anywhere in between these circles, right? To rotate
in any direction.
Any direction. So we've got move and rotate.
All right, fantastic. So the third and last tool you need to learn to be able to modify your objects in your scene is the scale tool.
Yes, so we grab that right here.
Yeah, or R on the keyboard is the shortcut. And again, you could either click on the middle square, so the white one, and that will scale it in all directions uniformly. Or you could get only the red handle, and that's going to scale it up in the width.
Yeah, it's going to squash and stretch in different directions, right? The green one's going to squash like this. And really kind of, you know, just we recommend you test it out. You just grab different objects, create different 3D objects, and manipulate them, move, squash them, rotate them. Just have fun. Get a little familiar, right, with navigating the Unity interface and manipulating 3D objects.
Yeah, so to recap, guys, W for the move tool, E for the rotate tool, and R for the scale tool.
Beautiful. All right, now we're just going to select all these objects inside of the hierarchy, and I can do that by, you know, left clicking on them. But if I want to select them all simultaneously, I'm going to have to hold down Shift on my keyboard. And you'll see that now I can actually select multiple objects at once. With all these objects selected, I'm going to hit the delete key on my keyboard. So I've got a blank Unity scene once again. And now I'm going to actually create that planet object in which we're going to be placing all of our other objects that are going to be enabling us to gain resources and basically build this kind of little ecosystem that's going to make up our game.
Right, so that's as simple as right-clicking, going to 3D object, creating a sphere. Let's name the sphere. So you can click on it, then go to the inspector. So the inspector is the window where all the properties basically of this object are going to appear. And those properties are in the form of different components. Let's not talk about that for now. Let's just go up here. You'll see the name of the object. It's called sphere. Let's name it to planet. Press enter and we're good to go. Now
Fantastic.
we're just going to scale up our planets. So we're just going to take the scale tool, R on the keyboard again, guys, scale it up.
All right.
You can maybe take the game window and put it side to side.
Absolutely. So that's a really important thing in Unity is that you can really customize the interface to fit whatever you prefer, right? And as you gain experience, you'll realize that you've got some interface layouts that you favor over others. So first of all, you can scale up or down different windows simply by left clicking on the edges here. So for example, I can make my scene really small or I can make it really large. I can also actually maximize a window. So this is simply done by hovering your cursor over a particular window, then clicking on Shift and then pressing space on your keyboard. And there we go. I've maximized on the scene, for example, or I can maximize the inspector or the hierarchy. You get the picture. Now that's not all we can do. We can also grab other windows, for example, the game window. So as you can see currently, either we just see the scene or we see the game. We can't see both simultaneously, which I think is a little problematic. So what we're gonna do is left click on the game window and you'll see that by holding down left click and dragging, we've actually grabbed the game window and we can dock it to the right here. And so now I actually see my scene and my game window at the same time, which is brilliant.
So to keep things nice and clean, guys, we're going to select our planets, and you'll see here we've got this transform component. So the transform component is the component responsible of the position, rotation, and scale of an object in Unity. Now we've been moving it around and all that, and so let's go ahead and just recenter it, keep things nice and clean. So we're going to go to these little three dots right here and click on Reset. And that's just going to bring it back to the center of our game world. Yeah, and just to illustrate clearly what Liam just said here, if I move my object, you'll see that some of the values in the inspector, in the transform component are changing. Same if I rotate, you'll see that all the X, Y, and Z values are changing, and same for scale. So this really dictates where your object is, what rotation it's got, and what's its size. All right, I'm gonna undo all that, and undoing is like in most softwares, Control Z, just hit that a couple times until you get back to those default settings here. Fantastic. So now we've got our planet inside of our scene. However, look, if I maximize on my game window, it kind of looks tiny, right? We don't want that. We want it to be nice and big inside of our game window. So what should we do, Liam? So let's just select our planet, scale it up a little bit. There we go, that's looking great. Great, I'm also gonna maybe move it up a little bit, so that it's kind of nice and centered, like so. Fantastic. I really don't like this color though, this blue and this gray. How can I change that? Looks really default, yeah. Very simple, guys. Just select the main camera here instead of the hierarchy. Then on the camera component, you'll see this clear flags variable. It's set to skybox at the moment. Let's change it to solid color. And then with the background color variable, you can set it to any color that you want with this cool little color wheel. Color wheel, yeah. Yeah. There you go. Fantastic. So that's how you can change the background color. And you can just see the little camera directly in the scene as well. And these are one of these things where, yes, you can see it inside of the scene window, this little camera gizmo, but you will not see this inside of the game window, right? It's just a visual aid for developers. You can actually move the camera around and rotate it to change the angle of your game. Yeah, you can move it and so on. Scaling will not do anything, but moving and rotating certainly will. In our case, we're just going to leave it like this with these default settings here. So the first thing that we want to probably do is have the ability to rotate our planet around using what? The left mouse button? Exactly. So we're going to want to left click and hold down with the mouse. So basically dragging around the scene to rotate the 3D object. Pretty intuitive stuff. So we just can see the planet, our little world, from any angle. And it's going to be kind of hard to see, right, with just a sphere, because you can rotate the sphere around, but you won't actually notice that that's happening. So just to make that ultra clear, we're going to create a little cube, 3D object cube, and just move that up here so we can see it resting atop the planets. And there we go. So now we're going to be able to better see what's happening when we rotate the planet around. However, you'll notice that if I just select the planet here and start rotating it, well, the cube doesn't rotate with it. We want the cube to follow the motion of the planets. Exactly, and to do that, we're basically going to have to parent the cube to the planets. So to do that, we're just going to select the cube in the hierarchy and left click it and drag it onto the planets. And there we go. Now it is parented.
So we see it's parented, but basically it's underneath the planet and slightly to the right here. So for example, if I click on the little arrow and clamps it, you'll see that we just see the planet. Then if I unclamps this, you'll see that we can see all of the children of the planet. So basically the children will follow the parents and follow it with the move, rotation, and scale. So for example, now if I rotate the planet, we can see that the cube rotates with it, which is exactly what we want. If I move the planet, it also moves the cube. If I scale it, the cube also scales with it, which is great. However, if I move, rotate, and scale the cube, the planet doesn't move, doesn't change, because it's the parents and this is the child. Fantastic. So now we're going to actually want to rotate the planet via code, because we can do this right in the scene view, but if I press play, the player can't actually do this himself. That's why we're going to go ahead and import some scripts. So inside of this free mini course, we're not going to actually get into C# coding. We cover all of that inside of our massive game development course, Game Dev Rockets. So if you want to learn how to actually code your own games, you're going to have to check that out here. Instead, we're just going to use some scripts that we have built and try to understand how they work within Unity, how to add scripts to objects and get them working.
Exactly.
So download those scripts, link in the
description.
In the description, and you'll actually have this little scripts folder here. And you'll see there's 4 different scripts. We're going to want to grab the rotate planet script. So I'm going to select my planet object. And what am I going to do now, Liam?
So again, remember guys, we talked about the inspector, and the inspector contains all different components that make up an object. So we've seen the transform components, which controls the rotation, scale, and position. And now basically guys, we're going to simply drag and drop the rotate planet script inside of the inspector, and that's going to add that script to our planet. A script is basically a custom component that we create ourselves and that we code out ourselves.
Yeah.
So once we add that component, you'll see that we've got this rotation speed, and like the name suggests, this variable is going to control the speed of our rotation.
Yeah.
So let's just press play and see what this does.
So now you'll see that if I click with my left mouse button and drag, I can start rotating the planet, which is really, really cool stuff. Now, however, you'll notice that it's extremely slow and really doesn't feel good. And this is why we're going to have to actually tweak the rotation speed variable. And you can do this even when the game is actually playing, which is amazing with Unity, is that you can test things out, change variables, change components, even while the game is running. So let's say I boost this to 200. Now it feels a lot better. Rotating the planet around is really quick, and we can just get a nice feel for how that controls. Great. Now if I actually stop playing by clicking on the square here, you'll see that the rotation speed variable is reset. So that's really important to note is that any changes you make while in play mode will not carry through, will not save when you get out of play mode. So this happens all the time. It's a rookie mistake of making tons of changes accidentally while in play mode and then reverting back and oops, you've lost all your changes.
Oopsie doopsie. Yeah.
Oopsie doopsie.
Don't forget that, guys. So let's put it back to 200.
Yeah. So basically the lesson here is don't make too many changes inside of the game mode. It's mostly just for like small tweaks and playtesting. Great, so there we go. We've got a planet that's actually rotating. Let's move on to the next step.
Alrighty, so the next step, guys, is that we're going to create some UI buttons that the player will be able to click on later to actually place different objects on our planets.
Yes.
So to create UI, the first step that we need to do is create a canvas. So to that, I'm going to come to the hierarchy, click on the little plus sign, go to UI, and we'll choose canvas. So the canvas, just like the name suggests, is the place we're going to be adding all of our UI elements to. So all of our text, buttons, sliders, all that are going to appear on our canvas.
Yes.
So let's select it, come to the inspector right here, and the first thing that we have to do all the time is set the UI scale mode to scale with screen size. At that, our UI is going to be nice and responsive, and it's going to look nice on like a big screen or small screen.
Yeah, it's going to respond to the screen size, as the name suggests. Now, currently, it's very important you check out the game window, and we've got something called free aspect here. So basically, this is the aspect ratio of your game. Free aspect meaning that you could just very flexible screen size, right? So it's going to adapt to that. You can see the canvas is also adapting to that really weird screen size.
That's not something that we want. We want to set a
a clear, a fixed aspect ratio.
So let's choose 16 by 9, for example. We choose that one often, right?
Yeah, and then all you can do is copy 16 by 9 inside of the reference resolution. So 1600 for the X and 900 for the Y. Great. So now the UI will nicely adapt regardless of the screen size. Really important stuff.
All right, let's create our first button.
So I'm going to go,
Yeah, let's right click on the canvas, go to UI, and we're going to create an image. There we go. Let's rename the object to keep things nice and clean. Let's call it button 1. Oops. There we go.
Great. So we see this little square, this little white square here. And what we're going to want to do is move it to the bottom left of our screen. We can do that in several ways. Either we can just grab the move tool and just move it to the bottom left of our screen, like so. This is not the most effective way of going about this. Instead, we should use this little icon at the top of our inspector here. So if I click on this little square, you'll see there's a bunch of other squares that appear. And now all I need to do is hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and click on any of these squares to basically snap my UI elements to basically one of these screen positions. So if I want my square to be at the top right of my screen, I'll just click on the top right square right here. In my case, I want them to be at the left of my screen, the bottom left, so I'll click on the bottom left square. Fantastic. And now I can maybe move a little bit. I don't want it to be super tight on the corner, give us some room to breathe. Okay, so we've got our little square here, but it's not actually a button yet. So yeah, what do we have to do to turn this little object into a button?
Yeah, very simple, guys. Again, Unity works basically with a component system. So all we have to do to add that functionality is add a new component. So inside the inspector, we're going to click on this add component button, and let's just search for button. There we go. And we've got this button component. Let's add it. And just like that now, guys, our image, which was a static image before, is now an interactable image that we can actually click on.
Yes.
And to see that better, we could actually change the highlighted color right here to something like, yeah, nice dark gray. And if we press play now, if we go ahead and hover over the button, you'll see that the highlight color changes.
Exactly, it turns to that gray that we set right here. You can also change the pressed color, let's say red. So now when I actually press or click on this little square, it's going to turn red. That's going to revert back to that white here. You'll see this little bug sometimes that happens, right? If I click red and then I let go and the button's kind of white instead of gray, right? It should be gray because we're hovering over it. This is why it's important to just change the navigation from automatic to none. That'll always fix the issue. So now the button will always respond as it should. All right, so we've got this button that's responding. We actually see, well, the player can clearly see these having an impact on the button. Super important, guys, to give players good feedback. And you'll see this throughout your whole game dev journey, whether it's for simple interactions with UI or actual mechanics and so on. You want to show the player he's having an impact on the world.
Yeah.
Nothing like less satisfying than hovering over buttons and having absolutely zero inputs on that.
Sometimes you don't even know that it's a button because there's no input at all. So make it clear that the player can interact with that element.
Player feedback. But that's, something a little more advanced. For now, great, we've got this simple button and it's interacting with what is changing color.
Yeah. All right, so for now, the button is just a white square. Doesn't mean anything. So let's add some text inside of it. So again, I'm going to right click on my button, go to UI, and we're going to choose Text Mesh Pro. It's going to prompt you to import Text Mesh Pro. So just go ahead and do that. There we go. Close out of that window now. And let's go ahead and rename this object to, cost. There we go.
So this is basically the cost of the object. So by pressing this button, we're going to spend a certain amount. Let's call it gold. Let's call the resource gold. And say this is going to cost 10 gold. So again, you can change the text input here. 10. And this is actually what's going to change inside of the scene. We'll see this 10. Now I can write anything I want in here, of course. I'm also going to make sure that this is nicely fitted with the button. I'm going to change the color of my text to black, for example, and then maybe also center it. So the alignment here, I want to make sure it's centered. Like
horizontal and vertically, exactly.
Yeah,
just one thing, you saw that you changed the text dimensions, and that's with this last sort of transform tool, which is the UI transform tool. It's a specific transform tool for UI, and it's going to enable you to make your UI bigger or shorter. Okay, so before actually spawning in the objects, when we click on the buttons, we actually need to create these objects that we're going to be able to place on our planet.
So I'm going to go ahead and create a 3D capsule, like so. And let's just call this environment piece. Great, so we can't really see it because it's actually inside of our sphere, so let's just move it up a little bit. And I would like to turn this into a prefab. So Liam, what is a prefab? This is a really important Unity concept.
Yeah, a prefab, guys, really simply is a stored version of an object. And to put it simply, whenever you're going to want to instantiate, so spawn an object inside of your game when you're playing the game, that object needs to be a prefab.
Yeah.
That's all you have to know for now, guys.
Absolutely. So we're going to create something called a folder. We're going to actually go over to this window right here. This is the project window, and it's going to, a bit like the hierarchy, right, which lists all the objects that are inside of a scene. Well, the project window is going to basically list all of the objects, scripts, sounds, fonts, you name it, that make up your project.
So to keep things nice and clean, guys, we're going to create a prefabs folder. So I'm going to right click here inside of the project window. I'm going to go to create and I'm going to click on folder. Now let's rename this folder to prefabs. And this is the folder where we're going to store all of our prefabs. So let's double click to go inside of this folder. And now I'm simply going to drag and drop the environment piece 1 inside of this prefabs folder, and that's going to turn it into a prefab.
There you go, as Liam said, it's a stored version of how this object currently is. Right, what's interesting is, for example, let's say I squash this object like this, it's really changed the shape, right? So in the scene view it looks really different, but if I actually just select this prefab and drag that inside of my world, you'll see, well, it's just basically as it was right before I made that change. Now if I want, you know, for example,
so keep in.
Yeah. Now if I want this change right here to be applied to all my prefab, to be applied to my prefab basically, say I wanted all of my capsules to look like this suddenly, well, all I need to do is go inside the inspector, click on this little drop down here called overrides, and then click on this apply all button. So basically here is going to be listing all the changes that you made to your prefab. It's going to basically ask you, hey, do you want to apply these changes to your prefab? I'm going to click apply all, and there we go. Suddenly my prefab looks like this squashed pill or something.
Like imagine this is going to gain you so much time. Imagine you had, let's say, a tree, and there's about like 1,000 copies of that tree in your game, and suddenly you wanted to change the color of that tree. So instead of having to change the color manually in all 1,000 trees, you just have to change it once, click on prefab, apply all, and all 1,000 trees are going to be
This
changed.
is if, right, the 1,000 trees are coming from the same prefab.
Yeah.
So yeah, prefabs, really important stuff. With that said, I'm going to grab these 3 here and delete them. Just grab this one here. I'm going to reset the scale. So 1 on the X, Y, and Z. So it's nice and uniform. It looks like a capsule again. I'm going to select it, go to overrides, apply all. So that actually saves into my prefab.
Now let's make a little material to change the color of this object so that it's not this boring white. Again, let's right click and go to create folder to create a nice little materials folder. There you go, keeping things nice and clean again. Let's double click on it and we're going to right click here, go to create material, and let's call this mat1. Alright, there we go. Now with this material created, we're simply going to drag and drop it onto our capsule, and that's going to apply that material to our objects. So now we're going to come to this albedo color wheel, click on it, and we can change the color of our material, and you'll see that the color of our environment piece is also changing.
Which is fantastic. Really easy way to add color to your 3D objects. Of course, there's a lot of different settings here. We're not going to cover them in this free mini course. Just, you know, play around with them if you want, have fun. One of them that's really useful and really simple is the smoothness. So say you want to make your capsule look really wet and have a nice white specular dot, well, you can just, you know, increase the smoothness here. Suddenly we get this really sharp white highlight that almost makes the capsule look kind of wet, right? So yeah, color and smoothness, play around with those. For this very first environment piece, I'm going to leave it white to basically reflect my white button. So this is the capsule, this is the object will spawn when we click on the on this first button here. Again, I want to make sure to select the environment piece and apply these changes to my prefab. What changes? Well, basically I added a new material to this object. So
Alright.
Bam. Interesting notes here, guys. If you go to your prefabs folder and select the capsule, you can actually make changes directly to the prefab so that all of those changes will automatically be viewed inside your scene.
Yeah.
So say I duplicated this capsule several times, and then I grab the prefab of this capsule and change the scale along the X. And there we go. Suddenly, all of our capsules have got that increased scale. Same for the Y.
Alright, there we go. We've got our first environment piece. Let's make the 3 other ones. So I'm just simply going to duplicate the first environment piece. And now we're going to also duplicate the material. Yep, let's go ahead, rename it to Mat 2. Okay, let's drag and drop the Mat 2 material onto our second capsule. Let's change the color.
So we want it to be maybe the same color as our button here. An easy way to do that, instead of just eyeballing it and trying to get the exact same color, it's a really cool tool called the eyedropper tool. Just click on that little eyedropper tool, and then anywhere you click in your scene, well, basically it's going to have that color. So I can even click on the project window right here. It's going to give me that gray color. In my case, I want to actually hover over the second button, click on that, so I get that little yellow color. Fantastic. And now all I need to do is turn this environment piece 2 into a brand new prefab by left clicking on it and dragging it into the prefabs folder. It's going to ask me whether I want this to be a actual original prefab or a prefab variant. Just choose original prefab.
Alright guys, so then just repeat this process for the 2 other environment pieces.
Super, so now we have our 4 objects that we want to place when we click on these buttons, and they've all been turned into prefabs, so I can safely delete them from my scene here. Now let's actually get these buttons spawning the object. So I'm going to select these 4 buttons by holding on Shift on my keyboard and selecting them. And then over in my inspector, I want to basically add one of the scripts that we've created, that we've imported into our project. So I'm going to go over to my scripts folder and actually drag and drop the spawn object script directly inside of the inspector. Fantastic. So now all these 4 buttons have this spawn object script. And you'll see that there's one variable, cost. So I'm going to select, for example, button 1 and make sure that cost is equal to 10 because we've actually, with the UI here, we've set 10. This costs 10 of our gold resource. Same for button 2, type 20, etc. If I select button 1 now and I go over to the button components, you'll see an on-click menu here. This is really important. So this is basically what we're going to be using to call a certain function from a script. Now you'll be learning all about functions and variables and all this coding terminology in the Game Dev Rocket course. For now though, just click on this little plus sign, and what you're going to want to do is left click over this spawn object script and drag it inside of this empty slot right here. Bam. And now you'll, instead of having no function, you're going to select spawn object and spawn. In short, when you click on this button now, we're going to be calling a certain function from our script, and this function is actually going to spawn in a certain object.
So to keep it simple guys, a function is basically a set of commands. So we're going to be clicking the button and it's going to be running a set of commands that we've coded out.
Yeah, so in this case, it's actually spawning an object. What object? Well, we have to define what object with this empty slot. So basically for now there's none. If I click, I'm not spawning any objects. So we're going to have to go over to our prefabs folder and drag and drop one of these prefabs that we've just made inside of this empty slot. Since this is the white button, the first button here, I'm going to drag and drop my white capsule inside of this empty slot. And now when I click on this button, I'm actually going to be spawning in my white capsule right here. Before doing that though, we need to create something else. We need to create a new empty game object called Game Manager. Go ahead, let's call it GM. Great, I'm going to reset the transform component, so basically reset the position, rotation, and scale by going over to the 3 dots and clicking on reset. And now I'm going to add a new script to this Game Manager object. So I'm going to go over to my scripts folder and drag and drop the Game Manager script right here. Fantastic. So this has got 3 variables. We've got gold, gold display, and planets. First of all, let's say that the player starts with, what? 100 gold. And now we also need to have a gold display. So basically this is the UI element inside of our game that's going to show the player how much gold he's currently got.
Yep, so you guys should already know now how to create UI, but let's go over it once again.
Yeah, we recommend you pause the video though and try and create the simple text elements yourself.
Challenge yourself. But here's the solution. We're just going to right click on the canvas, go to UI, create a new text Mesh Pro element. Let's rename it to gold display.
Press F on your keyboard to frame on that in the scene view, like so. So there we can see our new text element here. I'm going to go over to this little icon, hold down Alt on my keyboard and snap it to the top left of my screen. Currently, don't really like how this is placed. To scale up a little bit, I'm going to increase the size and maybe the color again. I'll change it. Just type 100 for placeholder. Make it bold. So this is going to be my gold display here. And I could call this whatever, you know, I could call this gold. And what basically is going to happen here is that via code, we're going to change whatever is written here. So I'm going to drag and drop the gold display inside of this gold display empty slot in the inspector. And it's going to just basically display the amount of gold I've got. So if I started with 100, it's going to display 100. If I type 50, it's going to display 50. You'll see right now if I press play, there we go, we've got 50. And if I can increase this, say to 202, there we go, it's going to display 202. It's exactly what we want. Lastly, we've got this empty slot here called planet. We're going to have to actually drag and drop our planets here. All right, back to our button now. We've got our environment piece, we've got the cost that's defined. So again, when I click on this, I'm going to be spawning my white capsule inside of the world, and it's going to be deducting 10 from my gold. So let's test this out. A really interesting little thing here. Now, sometimes you're going to want to press play, you're going to want to maximize on your window, on your game window. So it's just good to click on this, you can just play maximized. And when I press play, my game window is in full screen, so I can clearly see what's going on. Let's click on this button. And there we go. We've got our environment piece that's spawned into the world, and it cost us 10 gold, so we're down to 40.
So everything's working well. The UI is updating to show now the current gold we have. The button's working, we're spawning the objects.
Yeah, I can do this several times, and you don't see actually any new capsules spawning. This is because they're all spawning one on top of the other. So just make sure that this also works with the other buttons, because we've not actually done that with the other buttons. Just give you another example. Button 2, we're going to go over to the onClick event. We're going to add an onClick event. Drag the spawn object script inside of this empty slot, choose the spawn object, and then click on spawn here. And then what are we spawning? Well, we're going over to our prefabs, and we're spawning the second capsule here. So do that for the third and fourth button. Now guys, really important also that you regularly save your projects.
Oh yeah. So
really
to
important.
save your project, guys, really simple. Just press Control S or Command S if you're in the Mac. It's going to save your scene so that if you close Unity, come back to your project, it's going to be just as you left it.
Yeah, so there we've saved our scene, and you can find the scene right here, right inside of this scenes folder, inside of your project panel, your project window. It's called sample scene for now. Maybe rename it Liam to game. There we go. And if you wanted to make new scenes, you just right click inside of your project window, you go to create, and you go to scene, call this test. Now if I double click on this test, you'll see it's a blank scene. But I can go back to my game scene, and there we go, everything is as we left it because we saved it.
So yeah, you can have a scene, for example, for your main menu, and several scenes for your different levels. Basically, a scene is like a level in your game.
Exactly.
Think of it as that.
Exactly. So regularly, just press Control S, it really costs you nothing. It's like 1 second of your time, not even Control S regularly. Great. So we're actually spawning in our capsules when we click on our buttons, but now we actually want to place them on our planets. So we want them to follow the mouse cursor around, and then when we left click, we want to actually just place it and let go of it. Yeah. So we've created a little script to do just that. We're going to select all of our environment pieces here, and I'm going to go over to my scripts folder and just drag and drop environment piece script onto those capsules. Fantastic. So now, if I press play, I can click on the button, it's going to place one of the objects, and bam, big error happening here. All right, I'm going to tell you exactly why, guys. We're creating a certain script using something called raycasts, and the actual capsules, so these environment pieces, have a collider that's disturbing the actual raycasting. So what we're going to have to do is remove this component. And again, this is kind of getting into the slightly more technical aspects of game development. We cover all this in much greater detail inside of the Game Dev Rocket course, the full course. For now though, we're just going to remove this particularly troublesome components, the capsule collider.
We don't even need.
We don't need currently, so we're just going to click on these little 3 dots, and we don't need to reset. So you'll see most of these components, like the transform component, you can reset the values here. In our case though, we want to remove the component entirely. Fantastic. So now if I press play, that weird behavior will have completely disappeared. So I can click on the button, and there you go. Now I've got an object that's actually, over the planet surface, and I can left click and leave that around.
And it's also rotating nicely to face the correct direction of the planet, so that's really, really cool.
So yeah, there's little custom scripts that we created to place an object. Okay, now you'll also see that each one of these capsules, there's 2 variables inside of this environment piece script. There's wait time between gold and the gold increase. For example, if I select my first capsule, so this is kind of the weakest environment piece. Yeah. Let's say I want to gain 5 gold every second. So now every second I'll be gaining 5 gold. That's quite a lot. Maybe like we only gain 1 gold every second. And then for the second environment piece, maybe every second we gain, I don't know, 3 gold. Then for this one here, we gain 10. I don't know why it's bugging.
And then for the final boss,
50. So now if I press play,
of course, you're gonna have to play test this, guys, balance the game. These are just default values we're giving
so
you.
you'll see every second when I've got 1 of these white capsules in game, I'm actually gaining a gold every second. If I place the slightly stronger one, you'll see that it drastically increases. If I place one of these, well, we're quickly getting into the hundreds.
So we've got already a cool like resource idle clicker sort of feeling. We're trying to gain as many resources as we can.
Exactly. So we've basically prototyped a super simple experiment here. Of course, it's not an incredible game, right? This is just your very first little experiment. You've learned how to navigate around the Unity interface, create 3D objects, add scripts to those objects, create UI elements.
Oh, they've already learned a ton.
Yeah, a lot of things, guys. Just continue learning like this. And in the next video, it's going to be quite an exciting video, right? We're going to actually add visuals to our game to make it look a little better. So we'll see you in that second video.
Congrats, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.